Gary Chambers is not only a friend of the show, but also Senate candidate running in Louisiana. And throughout this race, he has had hit after hit when it comes to his ads. You remember when he went viral for smoking marijuana in a campaign ad? I don't think you're gonna forget that anytime soon. And by the way, totally proved right about the need to be a little bit more equitable on that topic, and Biden getting a bunch of credit now. So yes, he had that ad. That was followed up by an ad that actually showed a fictionalized version of a botched abortion, trying to give you an idea of what it's gonna look like in the future when Roe v. Wade is stripped away from more and more states, as well as, of course, him literally burning the Confederate flag in one of his ads. That was a personal favorite of mine. Well, now he's back to talk about Christopher Columbus and the substance-free, history-free adulation Christopher Columbus still gets. Take a look.
History repeats itself, especially when we lie about it.
And who's up next?
Me.
Come on up.
So it is wise for us to tell the truth.
My historical hero is Christopher Columbus.
Who do we allow our children to call their heroes?
In 1492, I set sail to find the continent of Asia. But instead, I stumbled upon a new land. Or so I thought.
If we tell them that a ruthless conqueror was a great explorer,
surprise! There are already people there. So I pretended to be their friend. Wink, wink.
that murderers were respected leaders,
I killed as many as I could with diseases that spread throughout the land.
and that thieves and enslavers were savvy businessmen.
Some I kept as servants. Others I sent to Europe as slaves. Well, at least the ones that survived.
Jeez, I always love Gary Chambers' performance in these ads, but that kid has a future because that was a great delivery there. And of course, as honest as all those details are and everything that was talked about in that ad did happen, that ain't the 10th part of the barbarous behavior that took place during that colonization. So Jackson, what do you think?
Well, I think that obviously he's very good at making ads, but one of the reasons he is because he tries to make people who stand for the, just the lied version of the history of America. He wants to make them angry as possible with it because of how he said it. You know what I'm saying, with the delivery, which is good because at the end of the day, like you said, that's really not a tenth of what happened because there was so much of a systemic process in how the entire eastern side of the world came over here. What happened to people, the tens of thousands of years of history that was here before that. And just, even if you don't want to talk about all that, like Christopher Columbus sailed over here with a boat full of rejects that society didn't want because it was like, oh, well, y'all might die trying to do this. So, go ahead and get on this boat. So that's the type of culture that they brought over. But I think one of the biggest key points with him and his effectiveness with ads, and I think he has a big future with it, is it's time to really shake these people up because it's like, what are you really mad about? Like,
yeah,
really? Like,
yeah, and they get mad. If you point out this stuff, they get mad. I tweet about it literally every year. They get so mad, and I don't understand it. If it makes you uncomfortable to know about the truth, take it up with the ghost of Christopher Columbus. Like, honestly, imagine if you found out that like an uncle of yours that you really like, 40 years ago, an employee of his said something you didn't like, so he cut off the employee's hands. That's your uncle. That's like someone you're more closely connected to, and it wasn't nearly as long ago. I feel like you'd still have to reevaluate your view of your uncle at that point, and that's just one person's hands, not tens of thousands, let alone the rape and the slavery and all that stuff. But for some reason, they feel more attached to a guy they've never met from 500 years ago and refuse to acknowledge the terrible things he did. By the way, bear in mind, they're perfectly willing to acknowledge the terrible things that other historic figures have done. Start a conversation about Genghis Khan with these people. They seem willing to talk about the barbarous behavior. And here's the thing, I bet Genghis Khan did some nice things from time to time, and yet we acknowledge the terrible mass murder and all that. It's so weird that they can't see that or refuse to see that they insist that if you did something that might be good, the consequences of it might be good, that anything else is allowed. We don't apply that to any people in the modern era, you'll know. So,
well, it just
great job, like Gary Chambers.
it hits home with the foundation of their identity, with their sense of identity. You know, because the idea that America is this place, because you have to think, what's one of the main things that conservatives criticize the left for? Basically wanting to improve society. You know, that's basically the crux of what their issue with the left is. And so, you know, when you point out the truth that this land was taken over basically through the more barbaric parts of our human nature, that shakes up that idea. That means that there is something to improve here. That means that these issues are real. That means that you are not special. And so all of that goes on at a subconscious level, because otherwise, again, it's just the truth. So that's all that's really going on. Their identity's just being shaken up.
That's what it is, and that gets them every time.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.